Over the last couple of weeks, I've had the privilege of playing through Clair Obscur Expedition 33, and after having beaten the main story of the game after about 36 hours of playtime, I can say that this game is without a shadow of a doubt one of the best and most unique games that I have played in the past decade. So today, I just want to give my spoiler-free thoughts on the game before it actually comes out tomorrow, and I want to give a massive thank you to Sandfall Interactive, Kepler Interactive, and Guillotine for providing me with an early review copy of the game. And just so we're all on the same page, this video is not sponsored, and I will be giving my full and unfiltered thoughts on a game that I think has lived up to and even somehow surpassed the hype surrounding it. And while it's not perfect, it is a game that is first and foremost very cognizant and respectful of our time and intelligence as players. Now, even though I've been super excited about Clair Obscur since I first got to see the reveal trailer, I've made a point not to interact with any of the promotional materials outside of this reveal trailer until I actually got to play the game for myself. So that means all I really knew about it was the game's core premise and the fact that it had a turn-based combat system with quick-time events integrated into your attacks to make it feel more dynamic. So I think it's fair to say that I didn't quite know what I was getting myself into, because while I figured I would like the game, I didn't expect to end up wanting to experience every little thing that the game had to offer, which is where I currently am. And even now, as I'm continuing to explore after having technically rolled the credits, I can't get out of my head just how intentional literally everything in this game feels. If there's something that I hate when I'm playing a game, it's when I can viscerally feel that the developers have added content simply for the sake of padding out the runtime of the game. Whether that means side quests that lack any substance or upside, obnoxious collectathons that aren't fun or you don't gain anything of use from completing them, or simply levels that are difficult to navigate and take forever to get through for absolutely no reason. And as I was saying each and every one of those things, I'm sure you were probably able to think of several games that fit at least one, if not more than one of those descriptions, that you have had to slog through just to get drip-fed another piece of engaging content. And I can gladly say, at least for me personally, Clair Obscur never falls into this trap. While I beat the game after playing for 36 hours, I have at this point put about 46 hours into the game, and the only thing that made me feel like I was wasting my time was when I would die in a tough fight, and it would take me to my last autosave, which in some areas may have been physically very far away. So if I kept dying over and over again, this walk of shame would get kind of demoralizing after a while, and there wasn't a whole lot I could do about it, because there's no way for you to force a save, or at least not one that I'm aware of. Ultimately, it didn't matter too much because it would autosave after you did anything noteworthy, but for a rare situation like this one, where I'm having to sprint across a large distance just to get back to a dangerous monster guarding something I wanted, it would make my eyes start to twitch a bit. But outside of this small inconvenience, there wasn't anything that was just padding out the game, and I think that this is heavily influenced by the fact that every area in the game is just so well made. I think it goes without saying that if you've seen anything about Clair Obscur leading up to its release, even if you're like me and you've only watched the reveal trailer, this game is an absolute feast for the eyes. Every area has such a distinct visual identity that sets it apart from the rest of the game, making every area feel like a unique and singular experience, while still being able to come together to create a cohesive and interesting world. No one area feels like the last, and that helps to give the game a constant freshness, beauty, and ambience that I've only really experienced this consistently a handful of times through games like Psychonauts 2, Persona 5 Royal, and Nier Automata, just to name a few. I would often find myself just walking through the levels, trying to soak in every ounce of beauty from this experience, because I knew I could only experience it for the first time once. And while that sounds cheesy to say, I think once you get your hands on it, you'll understand exactly what I mean, because it's hard to really put into words without sounding hyperbolic or like a fanboy just how many times my jaw dropped when I entered a new area. And what I think helps this game for me personally is that Sandfall's artists weren't scared to use color. Quite the opposite, actually. The darkness of the dystopia that has engulfed the world is so viscerally contrasted by the vibrant and saturated colors that fill your screen everywhere you look. Which makes sense because Clair Obscur is a phrase used in art to quite literally refer to the balance and pattern of light and shade in a painting or drawing, which is fitting when you are literally trying to fight back against someone named the Paintress. The developers are able to balance this light and darkness so incredibly well, and it has led to the creation, in my opinion, of one of the most memorable worlds I've ever explored. And what's more, without going into any details, I think that the narrative of the game is able to take this idea of light and darkness in stride too. It doesn't ever spoon feed you exposition, and instead it tells the story it wants to tell at the rate it wants to tell it, which led to a narrative that had me scratching my head often throughout the game trying to figure out what was happening, but left me walking away with my mind blown with how well constructed it was. There are moments that really dive deep into the darkness of the human experience with a grace and reverence that you rarely see in modern media in general, but these dark moments are contrasted by laugh out loud moments, and somehow they are able to walk that tightrope to ensure that neither feels out of place, all the while consistently respecting the intelligence of the player. But I don't want to say anything more than that because I will absolutely be making a spoiler-filled review discussing the game, so make sure you subscribe and leave a comment if that's something you'd want to see, because I don't even want to dance around the narrative too much in this video because I really think you should experience it with as little context as possible so that it hits you like it hit me. And while the narrative alone is superb, I can't discount just how incredible the English voice cast is. Each and every one of them bring their A game to this project. While I believe that the narrative and the gameplay, which we'll get to in a second, I promise, are engaging enough to keep you wanting more after every play session, the vocal performances gave a lot of added subtlety, emotion, and gravitas to the characters. Like I said earlier, I made a point to avoid most promotional material for this game prior to playing it, so when I booted it up and was greeted by Gustav, who is voiced by Charlie Cox, who's one of my favorite actors, who I had just watched in Daredevil Born Again earlier that day, I was floored. And if you're not already familiar, the English voice cast is made up of Charlie Cox, Jennifer English, Kirsty Ryder, Shayla Nix, Rich Keeble, Maxence Cazorla, Ben Starr, and even Andy Serkis. And while this isn't everyone, it just goes to show the sheer depth of talent they were able to get to work on this title. And this cast quality shines through every time their characters interact on screen, which is a lot. At times it felt like I was watching a blockbuster film, but the Christopher Nolan kind, not the Michael Bay kind. And who knows, maybe in a couple of years, that will actually become a reality, since they've already sold the game's film rights. But with all of this talk about how beautiful the game is, how it weaves together an incredible narrative, and how its vocal cast is the dictionary definition of talent, none of that really matters if the game itself isn't actually fun. So let's talk about the gameplay. As you're moving through the different areas of the game, you'll be greeted with monsters in the overworld that you can either engage with or run past. It's pretty standard fare for turn-based games to treat enemies like this nowadays, and you can either attack them first in the overworld to get the advantage in combat, or they can run into you, which allows them to potentially get an advantage. Ultimately, if you've played any modern Atlas game, it's the same vibe as that, only it's a fair bit less punishing if you whiff your attack and they engage with you first. You either ambush or you get ambushed. There's nothing crazy with it, though I will say that the hitbox of your ambush is not as big as the game's visuals make it look, which is something that kind of frustrated me a bit at first, but once I got used to it, it became a pretty seamless experience. All in all, you need to be pretty close for this thing to actually hit the enemies, and if you do it a bit too soon, there's a pretty good chance that you're cooked, because it's a pretty long animation, so you can't just spam it until you hit. Once you get the hang of it though, I wouldn't really call it a pro or con. it just kind of is what it is. These initial hits don't actually do any damage, they just give you a bit more priority in combat at the very beginning of the fight. Once you actually get into the combat itself though, oh boy. Now, I recognize that Clair Obscur's combat system may not be for everyone, but I have had so much fun with it, though it does kind of stress me out a bit. While yes, it's definitely a turn-based combat system through and through, it's much more fast-paced and dynamic than any other turn-based combat system I've personally experienced, barring a game like Undertale. Essentially, every move you make is its own QuickTime event, which involves rhythmic pressing of X in a wide variety of ways based on the ability you choose. To boil it down to the absolute basics, the more precise you are with these QuickTime events, the stronger your attacks will be. Obviously, this game has the standard debuffs, buffs, and status effects that you can use throughout the game or that are used on you, but depending on which characters you're using, you can coordinate and use these effects to really manipulate the battlefield in whatever way you want to. Pair this with the fact that each character has their own gimmicks, for lack of a better term, in combat, makes this a system where you have to really think about your party structure and how their abilities and gimmicks can play off of and support one another to optimize every single battle. While it definitely takes some getting used to as you figure out how to best create these syntheses, once you do figure it out, combat almost feels like a dance with the enemies, with you doing your QuickTime events to do as much damage as possible, and then when you give them the floor to attack, it's not like you can just sit back and idly wait for their attacks to be finished like in other turn-based games. No, their turn is when you need to focus all of your attention, even against weaker enemies, to ensure you can stay alive, because dodging and parrying in this game isn't a suggestion, it's a requirement. You have finite health, AP, and revival potions, and while there are definitely decent healing abilities in the game, they will never be able to heal through an onslaught of enemy attacks if you're not dodging or parrying. And just so we're fully on the same page, dodging is a bit easier than parrying, but parrying, which has to be very timed and precise, will give your party the opportunity to counterattack. So, do you want to ensure that you don't take damage with a dodge, which has a little bit more of a window and margin for error, or do you feel very confident and you know these attack patterns and you know that you will parry frame perfect every time so that you can get an advantage in combat? Now, I'm not super good at the game, if I'm fully honest, so I typically stick with dodging, and that works for me. And if you're struggling in a fight, while healing will definitely help in some sticky situations, there are some things that you can do to gain health much more consistently throughout the course of the battle, especially later in the game. Early in the game, you're just prolonging the fight more, but not doing any damage. You're just giving them an opportunity to continue messing you up if you don't know what their attack patterns are. The game forces you to pay very close attention in every fight to learn these attack patterns to the best of your abilities, because if you don't, you'll be getting very familiar with this screen. And to even further enhance the combat throughout the game, you will obtain more and more of these things called Pictos. Now, Pictos each have their own abilities and stats that will benefit your party that you can equip essentially like accessories or armor. And the cool thing about these Pictos is that if you have them equipped for at least 4 battles, then you will have mastered these Pictos, meaning that the ability housed in these Pictos can be equipped by anyone in the party using their Lumina points. So while you wouldn't get the stat benefits of a Pictos for the characters that don't have it equipped, you would still be able to get the ability for anyone else in the party. So even if Gustav is the one with the Dodger Pictos equipped, once it's been learned, Mael and Lune could spend 1 Lumina point apiece to be able to equip its ability to them, so they also get the abilities benefit, even if they don't get the stat benefits of the Pictos Pictos itself. And over time, you'll be able to learn more and more Pictos abilities, allowing for more customizability for your characters. And don't worry, you'll be able to level up everyone in your party's Lumina so that you can equip more of these abilities. It's a really cool, fun system that encourages a lot of experimentation. Combine this with the fact that your weapons and Pictos are primarily what determine your stats, despite being able to put skill points into very specific stats throughout the course of the game. All of this coalesces into the game, showing how much it respects the autonomy of the player to be able to customize their party however they please, with weapons having their own pros and cons as well. While I'm sure you can tell I thoroughly enjoy this customization, at first it's kind of a lot to take in and actually understand the nuances of. I think that there's something to be said for it having an almost inaccessible amount of freedom for folks who want to play the game a bit more casually. Now, there is a story mode present in the game that I didn't experiment with too much, but when I would turn it on in some areas, just to see how different the fights felt, it confirmed that there is definitely a difficulty difference, but it also confirmed that even on the story mode difficulty, if you aren't paying attention to upgrading your weapons, changing your Pictos, or equipping good abilities with Lumina, by the end of the game, you're still going to have a very tough time. I don't know. Ultimately, when it comes down to it, the flaws, at least for me, are pretty few and far between, and a lot of what I had experienced were small things like graphical pop-in and very occasional frame drops. And while I know motion blur disturbs some people, and it definitely is present in this game, it doesn't bother me too much. But I felt like it was worth mentioning that it is here if it's something that bothers you. And ultimately, I think a lot of this will be fixed in the day one patch. And even if it's not really a huge deal, and it never really broke my immersion, which is why I'm only adding this as kind of an addendum at the end here. If you like RPGs and you want a game that deeply explores the human condition with the care and attention that the story deserves in a world that most people couldn't think up in their wildest dreams, Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is the game for you. And even if you hate turn-based combat with a passion, I would still encourage you give this game a try, because sometimes the combat would get so intense it felt more like I was playing a game like Bloodborne as opposed to a game like Persona. The style just oozes from this game, from its soundtrack to its user interface to something as subtle as the sound design when you're running on different surfaces. And all of the effects in combat are so satisfying that make it feel like there's true weight to your attacks. The developers at Sandfall spared no expense with this game, and I can't wait for everyone else to be able to experience this masterpiece, and I hope you end up loving it just as much as I did, because I believe that Clair Obscur Expedition 33 is a special and singular experience that everyone should give a try. But that'll do it for this week's video, guys, and I want to pass the question off to you. Do you want to see more Clair Obscur videos coming from this channel? And are you going to buy the game? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and while you're down there, why not liking the video, why not subscribing to the channel, and why not even ringing that notification bell so you never miss another upload. And as always, I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, a fantastic rest of your week, and why not even a fantastic rest of your month. And I will see you in the next video. Later.